NBC buried a Seinfeld revival that would have changed everything, and the reason they killed it is something they never wanted you to know. In 2013, 15 years after Seinfeld ended, NBC quietly greenlit a full revival, not a reunion special, not a fake clip inside Curb Your Enthusiasm. A real 10-episode order with a shooting schedule and a soundstage on hold at CBS Radford. Then it vanished. And the reason isn't that Jerry Seinfeld said no. It's who said yes first and what that yes actually cost. You were never supposed to know how close this came. The official story is simple. Seinfeld and Larry David just weren't interested. End of conversation. Nothing to see here. But contracts existed. Numbers existed. And somewhere between a handshake deal and a press release that never got written, a decision got made that had nothing to do with creative passion and everything to do with protecting a much bigger bet NBC was making at the exact same time. Here's how it started. In late 2012, NBC Universal was bleeding in prime time, finishing dead last among the major networks for the fourth straight season. Executives went hunting for a sure thing, and nothing in television history was a surer thing than Seinfeld. The show that never talked about anything was still pulling 9 figures a year in syndication. So a small team inside NBC's comedy division, led by then-programming chief Bob Greenblatt, opened informal talks with Jerry Seinfeld's representatives about a limited event series. Not a full reboot, something closer to what Will and Grace would later do in 2017. Seinfeld notably didn't shut the door. Sources close to the discussion say he asked for creative control and a number north of $3 million per episode, a figure NBC was, remarkably, prepared to pay. By spring 2013, the deal had a shape: 10 episodes, a guaranteed order, not a pilot. Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Jason Alexander were both in exploratory talks, with Louis-Dreyfus's camp reportedly pushing for the revival to premiere after her run on Veep wrapped its early seasons. Michael Richards, still carrying the weight of his 2006 Comedy Club scandal, was the one variable nobody could nail down, but insiders say even his involvement was being negotiated as optional, with the show built to work with or without Kramer front and center. This wasn't fantasy. This was a deal moving through legal. Then the ground shifted under it. In July 2013, Netflix announced its first major original comedy slate was outperforming every internal projection, and streaming platforms started circling prestige comedy talent with checks broadcast television couldn't match. Suddenly, the calculus around a Seinfeld revival wasn't just, will people watch? It was, who gets to own it forever? And that single question is where the whole thing quietly died. Remember that signed-in-principle deal, the one with real numbers attached? Here's where it actually fell apart. It wasn't creative cold feet. It was a rights fight. NBC wanted the revival to live exclusively on its own platforms, anticipating the streaming service that would eventually become Peacock. Seinfeld's team wanted a shorter exclusivity window and a bigger back-end stake in future syndication and streaming revenue. Betting, correctly, as it turned out, that reruns of a new Seinfeld would be worth far more sold everywhere than locked into one network's walled garden. Negotiations stretched through the fall of 2013. And then, in January 2014, Netflix separately signed a 9-figure deal for exclusive streaming rights to the entire original Seinfeld catalog. That deal alone was reportedly worth close to $500 million over its life. The moment it closed, NBC's leverage and its motivation collapsed. Why fight over ownership of a new show when the old one had just become the single most valuable library title in television history, without NBC having to produce a single new episode? The revival wasn't killed by a lack of interest. It was killed by a bigger, safer payday that made the risk obsolete. Nobody had to say no. The money simply made yes unnecessary. Think about what that decision actually erased. A 2014 or 2015 Seinfeld revival would have landed in the exact window when Will and Grace, Roseanne, and Fuller House hadn't yet proven the reunion model could work. Seinfeld could have been first and biggest, reshaping how networks valued their own back catalogs years before the streaming wars made it obvious. Instead, an entire generation grew up knowing these characters only through reruns, while the show that could have defined the 2010s got left as a rumor in industry trade papers. So the deal was real. The stars were circling, and it still died not from creative differences, but from a check too large to say no to. Which raises the question nobody at NBC wants asked out loud. How many other revivals from how many other classic shows got quietly buried the same way, the moment someone realized the rerun money was safer than the risk of something new?